Where is your consciousness right now? Most people point to their head. The feeling that I am somewhere just behind the eyes looking out. Electrical signals fire in the brain, and somehow, out of that, the whole world you are seeing right now lights up. Consciousness equals brain activity. School teaches it, textbooks assume it. I was a quantum mechanics researcher, and I want to be honest with you from the very first minute. That assumption has a hole in it that has gone unsolved for over 100 years. And in the last few months, a wave of physics papers has started filling that hole with an answer almost no one saw coming. The answer they keep circling is this: your consciousness is not manufactured inside your skull. The brain does not generate it. The brain tunes into it by resonating with space itself. I am going to walk you through the physics carefully, and I am going to mark a hard line between what the equations actually say and where my own model begins. And by the end, I will tell you what this changes about the one question you actually care about. Why your reality moves for some people and stays frozen for others. Stay with me to the end. Let me start with the whole, because if you do not feel the problem, none of the rest will land. You have had moments you cannot quite explain. A person drops into your mind, and that same day they message you. You picture a scene vividly, and days later it happens in front of you. A flash of knowing with no chain of reasoning behind it. Easy to wave away as coincidence. Hold that thought. We will come back to it with equations, not wishful thinking. Here is the deeper problem underneath all of it. A neuron fires. An electrical signal runs down a nerve. We can measure every volt of it. But nowhere in that electricity is there a single drop of what it is like to see red. The signal is not red. The signal does not hurt. So how does a burst of electricity become the felt experience of redness, of pain, of joy? The philosopher David Chalmers gave this a name in 1995, the hard problem of consciousness. And it is hard precisely because measuring the brain perfectly still does not tell you why any of it is experienced from the inside. Mainstream neuroscience has mostly answered with a placeholder. When neurons fire in a complex enough pattern, consciousness emerges. But why? Why would complexity alone produce an inner world? Saying it emerges is naming the mystery, not solving it. And the "it's all in the brain" picture leaves three questions it simply cannot answer. 1. Where did consciousness come from? Was the early universe just dead matter? And if so, when did experience switch on? 2. Where is the line? Why does anesthesia make consciousness vanish? And where exactly does it go? 3. Can we predict it? Is there any physical quantity that tracks whether a system is conscious or not? As long as you insist consciousness is built inside the brain, those three questions stay permanently locked. And in the last year, some of the most serious people in the field have started doing something radical. They have begun to drop that assumption. The moment people pointed to came in April 2026. Christof Koch, one of the most respected consciousness researchers alive, a man who spent decades trying to find consciousness inside the brain, said in public that he now suspects consciousness is not produced by the brain at all, that it may be woven into the fabric of reality itself. For someone with his history to say that out loud sent a quiet shock through the field. So, if consciousness is not made inside the brain, where and how? To get to the new answer, I have to give you one piece of physics first. The strangest empty space you will ever meet. The zero-point field. In English, zero-point field, ZPF for short. And it starts with a word you think you understand. Vacuum. You picture a vacuum as nothing. Empty space. The black silence between the stars. Where nothing is and nothing happens. But quantum electrodynamics, the most precisely tested theory in all of physics, settled this decades ago. Zoom into empty space far enough, and it is boiling. Particles and antiparticles flicker into existence and vanish constantly. Energy churns and never stops. The emptiest place you can imagine is, in fact, the busiest place in the universe. That seething energy is the zero-point field. 0 point refers to absolute zero minus 273 degrees, the coldest anything can get, where all energy should drain away. But it doesn't. Quantum mechanics forbids it. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you cannot pin down position and motion at the same time, means the energy can never fall all the way to zero. Even at the coldest possible temperature, space still hums. And the zero-point field has one more property that matters enormously here. It contains every possible frequency at once, every mode of vibration that can exist in this universe. All overlapping, all present, everywhere. And this is the hinge of the whole story. One physicist proposes that each of those frequency modes corresponds to a shade of conscious experience, a quale, the redness of red, the ache of an ache, the lift of a piece of music. If that is true, the field that fills all of space is not just energy, it is the raw alphabet of experience itself. That physicist is Joachim Keppler, and in late 2025 he published a theory built exactly on that idea. Let me give it to you straight, what it claims, and how far the evidence actually goes. It is called TRAZE, the theory of resonant amplification of zero-point modes, entrained. The core claim is simple to state. Consciousness arises when the brain resonates with the quantum vacuum, with the zero-point field, that is, with space itself. And I want to kill one misunderstanding immediately. The zero-point field is not some distant cosmic ocean far away in the stars. It fills the space on your desk, the space inside your skull, a few millimeters just past your skin. Space itself is the field. There is no gap between you and it. So how would a warm, wet brain resonate with it? TRAZE lays out a chain. Let me build it one step at a time. Step 1. The most abundant signaling molecule in your brain is glutamate. Kepler's model says a specific frequency in the zero-point field resonates with the vibration pattern of glutamate, and that this happens inside cortical microcolumns, tiny vertical bundles of about 100 neurons standing like pillars in the cortex. Each microcolumn acts like an antenna, tuned to pick a frequency out of the field. Picture forests of these thin pillars, and in each one, molecules and the faint field of space beginning to hum at the same pitch. Step 2. Once that resonance starts, something remarkable happens inside the microcolumn. Many molecules begin to vibrate in lockstep, a scattered crowd suddenly moving as one wave. Physicists call that quantum coherence, a deep, ordered togetherness at the quantum level. And here is the objection every honest person raises. The brain is warm and noisy. Quantum coherence is fragile. It should be destroyed instantly in there. That objection is exactly right, and for 30 years it was the knockout blow against any quantum theory of the brain. But it has started to crack. In 2025, work published through Oxford Academic reported that the Penrose-Hameroff idea, quantum effects inside the brain's microtubules, gained support from data showing anesthetic drugs binding directly to those microtubules. Put anesthesia where the quantum structure is, and consciousness switches off. The brain is too warm for quantum effects. Wall is no longer airtight. Step 3. When the coherence stabilizes, the zero-point modes get amplified, a faint field forms inside the column, and it nudges how neurons fire until the brain settles into a special balance point physicists call self-organized criticality. TRAZE calls that moment the ignition of consciousness. So in this theory, being conscious is the state where that resonance and ignition are sustained. Falling asleep, going under anesthesia, that is the resonance breaking, the ignition going out. The brain does not switch consciousness off like a lamp. It loses its grip on the field. Let me make self-organized criticality concrete, because it is the heart of it. Imagine dropping sand, one grain at a time, onto a table. The pile grows. Then, at some point, a single grain triggers an avalanche, sometimes tiny, sometimes the whole slope. Right at the edge of collapse, the pile sits in a critical state, balanced exactly between order and chaos, where one small input can cascade into something huge. Your brain, when you are conscious, holds itself right there at the edge, beta and gamma waves syncing, information racing across the whole brain in an instant. When consciousness fades, that balance tips toward order. The waves quiet, and the flow stops. Which leaves the real question, what keeps the brain balanced on that knife edge? All neuroscience never had an answer. Kepler's is direct, the resonant coupling to the zero-point field. The resonance with space itself is what holds the brain at criticality. While the resonance holds, consciousness is lit. The instant it breaks, consciousness is gone. That is the published physics. As honestly as I can give it to you, TRAZE is a real peer-reviewed theory from 2025. and it is a theory, a candidate, not settled fact. No one has measured a quale coming out of the vacuum. Hold it as the most interesting, serious proposal on the table, not as proven truth. And now, I am going to do what I always do. I am going to mark the line. Everything up to here was physics other people published. From this point on, this is my model, my interpretation. I will tell you exactly where I am building past the equations. I have 3 hypotheses. I've held them privately for a long time, and reading the 2025 and 2026 work together is the first time they have felt sayable out loud. Let me take them in order. Hypothesis 1. Consciousness is not produced inside the brain, and it is not poured into the brain from outside either. It rises from the interaction between brain and space, and that interaction runs both ways. Here is what I mean by both ways. The brain is not a device broadcasting one way into space, and space is not a battery feeding energy one way into the brain. They shape each other. In 2026, a peer-reviewed paper in Scientific Reports framed the observer not as an outsider measuring a system from the outside, but as a processor embedded inside the quantum system whose own internal state, attention, expectation, the way it sorts the world, helps decide, probabilistically, whether information settles as a particle or stays spread out as a wave. So as your brain resonates with space, the pattern of that resonance is also helping choose what space brings into focus. Out and in one circuit. A single breath shared between a mind and the field around it. And I think this is exactly where lives diverge. People who feel stuck treat the relationship as one way. Either the world hands me things, or I beg the world for things. People whose reality moves treat it as a circuit. They feel themselves in dialogue with space, not pinned underneath it. That is hypothesis 1. Hypothesis 2. And this may be the one I most want you to sit with. Consciousness is not locked inside the box of the skull. It exists as a network that permeates space itself. Follow the steps. From 2024 onward, research centered at Shanghai University showed, theoretically, that entangled pairs of photons can form inside the myelin sheets that wrap your nerve fibers. Entangled means correlated instantly, across distance. And entanglement has no built-in limit on distance. Then came what I consider the closing move. A 2026 update to Bell's inequality shut the last mathematical escape route. The idea that entanglement is only apparent, secretly explained by local hidden variables. That door is now closed. Entanglement is a real distance zero connection in nature, not a metaphor. Now watch where my model goes and notice that this is me, not the journals. If entangled photons exist inside your brain, and entanglement does not care about distance, then nothing guarantees the entanglement stays politely sealed inside your head. The photons in your brain could, in principle, be entangled with photons in someone else's. Maybe someone across the room, maybe, in principle, someone across the planet. Threads with no geography running between one mind and another, ignoring walls, ignoring borders. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the spot where people overstay. To be clear, no one has demonstrated brain-to-brain entanglement between two people. That step is mine, a hypothesis I find hard to resist once you put the pieces side by side. I am telling you it is my reach, not a measured result. Put it together and a picture forms. Consciousness is not only in the brain, it permeates space, spread out as a field, and the brain works like a relay node inside that field, not the generator of consciousness. A receiver that tunes into it, and a transmitter that sends a signal back. And now those small moments from the beginning stop being embarrassing. The person who comes to mind minutes before they call. The strong intuition that turns out right. They only looked like nothing, because we assumed consciousness was sealed in the skull. If consciousness permeates space, they become ordinary, expected physics. Hypothesis 3. This is the one that sounds the most extreme, and it is the most important. What we call space, and what we call time, may be a holographic image generated by consciousness. Physics already has a serious version of this idea, the holographic principle. Roughly, the three-dimensional space you think you live in may be a projection from information stored on a lower dimensional surface. There is a hard mathematical correspondence behind it called AD-S-CFT, where the physics of a three-dimensional space with gravity can be written completely equivalently as a two-dimensional theory on its boundary. The 3D world, fully captured as a projection of 2D information. This is real, mainstream, theoretical physics. A flat sheet of information, and out of it a full three-dimensional world standing up like light off a hologram. And in my model, sitting where the projector belongs quietly is consciousness. And there is a 2024 line of work, holographic brain theory, suggesting the brain itself may store information holographically. Not the world exists first and the brain records it. Instead, brain and cosmos may be one informational hologram, not two separate things. One more piece from 2026. A fresh reading of the delayed choice quantum eraser, the famous experiment everyone said rewrites the past. The reinterpretation, it was never rewriting an objective past. It was rewriting the observer's fixed past. Reality is not bolted to the outside world. It is stuck to the observer's side of the glass. Several half-transparent versions of today, layered over the same scene, and when the observer shifts, one slides to the front while the others quietly dissolve. So, hypothesis 3 pulls it together. Consciousness is the projector of the hologram we call space and time. Consciousness comes first, and space, time, and matter are projected out of it. We assume we live inside a 3D world. I am suggesting it may be the reverse, that space and time arise inside consciousness. Let me fold all three into one sentence. Consciousness is a holographic field that permeates space. The brain is a receiver and transmitter that resonates with it. And the 3D space and flowing time you experience are images that field projects. That is my hypothesis. And I will keep calling it a hypothesis even as the 2026 physics keeps drifting toward it. At which point, the honest question is, so what do I do with this? Because none of it matters if it does not touch your actual life. So let me bring it all the way down to the ground. Start with a question that haunts anyone who has tried to change their life. Why do two people study the exact same ideas and one watches their reality shift fast while the other works at it for 10 years and nothing moves? The usual answers: not enough effort, not enough belief. But you know people who try ferociously and stay stuck, and people who believe completely and still do not move. So it is not effort, and it is not belief. In this model, the difference is one thing, where you place your consciousness. People who stay stuck keep their consciousness locked inside their head, straining change inside the skull alone. And in this framework, that backfires in the worst way. Because the one thing is fixated on the reality that has not changed. So the brain keeps resonating with the 0-point mode that carries not changed yet. The harder you strain, the more tightly your antenna locks onto the frequency of the thing you do not want. And the present gets reinforced. People whose reality moves are doing the opposite. Their consciousness is open out of the head, into space, resonating with the field instead of clenching inside the skull. Not straining against the present, tuning toward a different frequency. So let me redefine the usual words in physics terms. Observation in this model is the act of the brain selecting which 0-point mode to resonate with. When you place your attention on something, your brain begins resonating with a specific frequency of the field, and that resonance is what gets cut out of all possibility and delivered to you as reality. The subconscious then is just a set of frequencies your brain habitually resonates with. The same pattern every day, locked in. And rewriting the subconscious is not gritting your teeth harder. It is retuning which frequencies you resonate with in the first place, which is exactly why willpower alone so often fails. A single figure, eyes closed, and the small ball of light that was trapped around the head slowly opening outward, past the room, past the city, out toward the space between the stars. And if hypothesis 3 holds, there is a deeper way to say it. The future is not built from nothing in the present. It is projected onto the hologram of space and time. Change the source of the projection consciousness, and the projected future itself changes. You are not forcing the present to mutate, you are moving the projector. Now, is any of this testable, or is it just a beautiful story? This is where I have to be most honest, because honesty is the whole point of this channel. 3 lines of test are actually live. 1. Brain cells emit faint light biophotons, and TRAZE predicts that emission should rise as glutamate resonance crosses a threshold that is measurable and being looked at. 2. In 2025, work in neuroscience of consciousness reported evidence of large-scale quantum entanglement in living human brains, correlating with conscious states and working memory. The 2-1-4 quantum effects objection, weakening again. 3. The 2026 observer embedded model wrote the observer's effect on reality into an actual equation, a Lindblad equation. The observer shapes reality, stepping down from philosophy into math. None of that is a finished proof. I am not going to stand here and tell you science has proven that you create your reality. It has not, and anyone who says otherwise is selling you something. What I am telling you is narrower, and I think more interesting. The frontier is, for the first time, building the tools to ask the questions seriously. That is new, that is real, and it is enough to change how you hold your own mind. So here is where I will leave you. Your consciousness is not a prisoner sealed inside your skull, watching a world that happens to you. In this model, it reaches into space itself, resonating in real time with a field as old as the universe, and it may be standing on the side that projects space and time, not the side that merely receives them. And changing your life in that picture is not forcing the world to bend. It is opening your consciousness out of your head into space and retuning the frequency you resonate with, which is the line I want to leave with you. My mind is not locked inside my skull. My consciousness reaches into space itself, and the reality I live in forms where the two resonate. Say it slowly and mean it. My mind is not locked inside my skull. My consciousness reaches into space itself, and the reality I live in forms where the two resonate. If that reached something in you, write it in the comments, in your own words. There is a reason I keep asking. Something happens when many people hold the same line at once. And one last thread, because it leads straight into where we go next. If consciousness really does reach across space, then two minds entangled across distance is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of a stranger one. Next time I want to open the link between quantum entanglement and synchronicity, why the thing you hold in mind seems to arrive dressed up as coincidence. I will see you there.